Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francine Cilio, and I work for Gifted Services. My position allows me to support teachers and students and parents with everything gifted. And I am so happy to be here today to help you learn a little bit more about your gifted child.
And I am Regina Hollinger, and I am Francine's partner working with Orange County Public Schools to support our gifted students and their education, and also to help you understand your gifted child a little bit more. Hopefully, this presentation is going to help us do that. And just want you to know that Francine and I have experience not only in supporting teachers and students in Orange County, but we have been gifted educators and gifted parents. We have gone through the process of raising each of us two gifted children who are now adults. So we are here really relating to you and your experience and hoping that this is going to be very valuable to you and the support that you might be looking for.
Right. And so throughout our presentation, we are able to see the chat box. If you have any questions or any stories that relate to what we are discussing on a specific slide, please chime in and put those comments in the chat box. Because not only is it going to be for us to answer your questions, but it benefits everybody in the presentation, because we all relate to so many of the positives and negatives that we experience raising gifted children. So, have you ever wondered why your child behaves differently than their peers and siblings? It is because their brains are actually wired differently. Today, it's our goal to help you understand why your child behaves the way they do, and to also offer strategies for you to best meet their needs. Gifted brains are highly fuel efficient, relating to the picture on the slide of a Prius and a Ferrari. They are the Priuses of the brain world when tasks are routine and simple, but they have the secret heart of a Ferrari. The gifted brain uses little fuel like a Prius to tootle around the supermarket or the playground, but if it has the need, the horsepower is there. It can use massive amounts of fuel and recruit other neurons to perform at extraordinary levels. Specifically today, we have 5 objectives that we are going to cover. We are going to identify the unique characteristics of the gifted brain, as well as understand the advantages and disadvantages of these characteristics. We will also identify behaviors often associated with the gifted brain and understand why these behaviors are a natural consequence of the gifted person's experience. And finally, we will give you strategies that you can use immediately when interacting with your children. Does your gifted child pick up on things others don't notice, come up with creative stories, pick up knowledge very quickly, and connect new knowledge with things they already know? Does your child ask a lot of questions, especially why? Do they remember the tiniest details from long ago? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you understand that being gifted is much more than being smart. Gifted children benefit from challenge and a more accelerated pace of learning than most other children. And the gifted brain is significantly different in terms of functionality, structure, internal networks, and processing rates.
And while all of these things are wonderful advantages and make us feel very grateful that our child has these abilities, um, often when our child is first identified as gifted, we're told with the words, congratulations. It feels like it's such a wonderful thing. And in many ways, it is. And yet, being gifted does not always feel like a gift. In fact, if you asked children that are identified as gifted if they would give the gift back, many of them would say yes, because it actually comes with drawbacks that include emotional overload, sensory hypersensitivities, personal disorganization, distractibility, delayed processing due to analysis paralysis, and getting lost in thought due to an excess of options. Why does this happen? It happens because the gifted brain experiences hyper neurological functioning. This hyper neurological functioning impacts all aspects of a person's experience, not just their intelligence. And unfortunately, much of what we know as parents of our gifted children is that they have the capacity to do more, to learn more quickly, to make broader connections. And yes, those things are true, but that's not all that it is. And this doesn't only happen while they're in school. The emotional overload that gifted people, and I say people because it can be happening to parents as well, adults that are gifted, not just the children, but for children, this experience can be much more overwhelming because of their lack of maturity. But they experience emotional overload in sense of how they feel the pain of the world. You know, does your child get really upset over social injustices or the fact that, you know, children in another country might not have the food and resources that they do? Do they get upset with their own lives or the things that are happening to their friends or other people around them at a level that is much more intense than people typically respond? Well, this is due to the fact that emotions are stored in the brain. And if your brain is functioning at a hyper level, then your emotions are also being experienced at a hyper level. In addition to that, their five senses could be out of whack, more extreme than other people's. Do you have a child who says, I can't wear this shirt, it's bothering me because there's a tag on it? Or refuse to wear socks because the socks have little nubs on them that bother them? Well, this is because their physical awareness of sensations is heightened compared to the average person. They might be personally disorganized, being scattered in their thinking because so many thoughts are coming in at once that they're trying to process them all. And in their conversation, they might jump from one to another to another. And we might be looking at them like, wow, where is this all coming from? But imagine being inside that brain, inside the brain that is having all of this coming at it. They might experience distractibility, jumping from one thing to another, maybe getting very excited about something, engrossed in something, and then all of a sudden losing interest in it because a new interest has popped up on their radar. They might, with analysis paralysis, have a really frustrated experience when it comes to answering multiple choice questions or performing on tests, because as they look at those choices, they can justify more than one being correct. They look at things more deeply and see more possibilities than others. And with getting lost in thought, they might not be able to make a decision on something because there are too many options, or because the option being offered to them might have even the slightest complication to it. And so these things that are experienced by the gifted individual can be very overwhelming and frustrating and not feel like a gift at all. So let's look at the next slide. And there's a picture there of two brains, two sets of brains. The first one is of the average individual working in math, and the second is of the gifted individual working in math. And you can see the orange and yellow in these pictures shows the brain's activity. Just notice the advanced stimulation, the increase in activity that's happening in the gifted brain. And so that just gives you a visual of how different the experience is of a gifted individual compared to a non-gifted individual. And when we say that, we're talking about 98% of their peers being non-gifted. That means that only 2% of the people that they are with in a classroom, in a peer setting, only 2% have brains that think like theirs. This is not just a quantitative difference, meaning I can do more, or the child can do more, or the child can move faster. That's quantitative. And yes, that's true, but it is not only quantitative, it's qualitative. It creates a different quality of life, a different type of experience of being human in the world. It isn't just about intellect. It isn't just about being a student. It's about how they live their lives and perceive their experiences. And so you can see from all of the points on the slide, they have experiences that are very different from others, and it could cause them frustration, boredom, heightened compassion for others, and it can make them feel like they don't fit in, or that there is something different or wrong with them, and it threatens their sense of belonging. On the next slide, you can see there's an illustration here, a picture here of a satellite in space. And I love this visual because it reminds me of a conversation I had with a wonderful psychologist. Her name is Patty Gatto Walden. And I'm going to type that in the chat for you later on when I'm done speaking, so in case you want to look her up. And she's a fantastic psychologist because she's one of the few people in the profession that is also an expert in the gifted field. And so that is so valuable. And she was talking to me once, and she explained the gifted experience as being that satellite in space that's out there, that's picking up everything. They're not tuning into a channel of basic cable like most people are. Most people see one or two or three possibilities of things that they're aware of in their environment, and that's how they process information, and that's what they're aware of. And then there's some people who have like the direct TV package, right? They get hundreds of channels, and they're really highly efficient, and they're aware of a lot of things. But the gifted individual is even beyond that. They are the satellite in space that picks up everything, even things they don't want to pick up on, and they don't have a way to filter it out. Again, it goes back to the hyper functionality of their brain, and this heightened perception often alienates them from their peers. And as a result of wanting to fit in, the gifted child may hide their true self from others because they want to belong. And they might hide themselves even from their closest friends and family.
Okay, we're going to pause for just a minute right now, and I would like you to think about, is there a time that you can recall that your child perceived a situation differently than others? Maybe they had thoughts of fear, and exclusion and being different and alienated from their friends or family. So they refrained from expressing their thoughts or expressing their perception. If you can think of an experience that you would like to share with other parents or us, please put it in the chat box because I am confident that other parents will relate to you and your experiences with your child. As you're thinking about that, I also want to talk about the two-faced label. I love this cartoon because it sums up what many children go through at school. Another way that gifted students sometimes feel alienated or their sense of belonging is threatened because they are labeled gifted. There is a misconception amongst adults and your child's peers that what it means to have a gifted mind is that they have they are allowed extra experiences, special experiences that other students do not have. They are even believed to be part of the exclusive elite club. And sometimes there's resentment for these special services that gifted students receive because they perceive gifted students as getting more than others to begin with. But actually, gifted services are meant to be different, not more. They are designed to meet the unique needs of the gifted mind. I like to refer to Olympic athletes as an example. Olympic athletes, even though they are the best in their sport, still have a coach. The same is applied to gifted students. They need assistance building on their strengths as well. It is important for us to arm our children with what they need to understand that feeling alienated and that sense of not belonging can be corrected when society understands the differences between their brain and others. Asynchronous development. That might be a phrase that you might not have heard of before, but it is so prevalent with our gifted children. Asynchronistic development is characterized by uneven development of their emotions, intellect, and social capabilities. An example is an 8-year-old might have interests in physics that match a college student, have concerns for social justice like an adult, but might not be able to tie their shoes. Or you might see them have a meltdown because someone moved their milk or moved their toy in the wrong place. This is something that is very typical amongst gifted students. And as parents, we have to recognize this asynchronistic development. If you have an example of a asynchronistic development that your child is experiencing or has experienced, this would be a great time to put it in the chat box.
Gifted individuals also experience what's called emotional overexcitability. What this means is that they experience emotions in a way that is more extreme than others. And this has nothing to do with their maturity level. This has to do with the fact, like we said earlier, that emotions are housed in the brain and the brain is operating at a hyper level. So it may appear as a child having a tantrum or acting immature, but it is actually based on the intense experiences that are very real to the child. Just because others don't feel the intensity that the gifted child might be feeling, it does not mean that their experience is any less real than it is. And their response to it is just the best response that they can give at the time because they don't have the maturity to learn to know how to handle it better. So you might see your gifted child having intense emotional responses, heightened sensitivity to what they experience in their environment, developing a strong attachment to people or places or things that are atypical, developing deep empathy for others, or having a hard time adjusting to change. Each of these things are results of the emotional overexcitability that gifted individuals experience. In addition, because their brains absorb information so quickly, and they have interest in learning at a higher level than their peers, they might have advanced knowledge in a certain subject area. And sometimes that knowledge serves them well, but other times it can conflict with their chronological maturity. Okay, because maturity is only developed through life experience, right? We become mature as we go through life and we learn from our experiences, and we can make predictions and learn responses that are healthy for us and productive. But when we're very young, when your child is very young and they have knowledge way beyond their years, but not the maturity, it can make it very difficult for them to handle their emotions and their responses to situations. I remember the story of a third grader who was obsessed with meteorology. He created a daily weather report that he put in print and shared it in his classroom with his classmates and his teachers every single day. He told them all about the complexity of weather patterns. He understood everything about lightning and storms and the power of a lightning bolt and what it could actually do. And it was thrilling for him to really engage in exploring this topic more deeply. And then one day, there was a really extreme lightning storm, and this individual freaked out. I mean, by an average person's perception, it's like, wow, what happened to this child? He reacted so strongly that he made every person in his home, every living thing in his home, including his pet bunny, his dog, go to the laundry room, lock themselves in the laundry room. And he was in hysterical tears with welts on his face because he was so worried about the family being destroyed by the lightning bolt. Well, that's because his intellect understood the power of lightning, but his maturity, his life experiences did not give him the ability to understand that people go through lightning storms all the time, and as long as they're in a safe shelter, they will be okay. And so, this emotional response to someone just looking in would be like, why is this child responding this way? But it's because of the emotional overexcitability tied with their advanced knowledge that creates a very difficult challenge for them to handle situations that other people can easily navigate. So, in addition to emotional overexcitabilities, they experience the world in a different way than others do. And we keep repeating this because we really want you to understand how it affects the way they actually experience their lives and form relationships with people around them. And sometimes some of the messages that we send them, while we're meaning to help them or we're thinking that we're communicating a simple message, the messages might actually be interpreted in a way in which the gifted child feels bad about who they are and how their brain works. And so, as we process the information that's been given so far, it's valuable for us to reflect on unintended messages that we might be giving to our gifted children. And we want to look at some ways in which we can reframe some of these messages to provide support and understanding for them. So, one of the first messages that I have heard gifted children complain about the most, and I really want to underscore that, gifted children complain that adults in their lives, parents, teachers, say this message to them, and it is, you should know that you are gifted. And while the person delivering that message might be trying to say, hey, I'm surprised that you don't understand this, you usually don't struggle with something like this, what they are actually communicating by giving a message like that is that because you are gifted, you should know everything and you should never need to ask for help. And if you ask for help, then you are revealing that the label of gifted might have been given to you in mistake. And therefore, it can be really detrimental for the individual who's trying to live up to this label, but still needs help in some areas. So, how could we reframe that message? Rather than saying, you should know that you're gifted, how could we reframe that message? We'd love to see some of your ideas in the chat.
One of the ways that we could reframe that specific message is by asking, tell me more about what is confusing you. How can I help? That turns a negative message into a positive one. Instead of you should know that, because they probably do, you can ask them to tell about what confuses them. Having them explain their thinking will help you understand where they began and how they came to the conclusion that they did.
Another message that we send that is damaging is saying, stop being so overly sensitive. Now, like we mentioned in the last slide, while the gifted individual's response might be more extreme than the average person's response to the gifted individual, it is simply their response. And when you tell them that their response is overly anything, then we send them a message that there is something wrong with them. And of course, we do not want to send our children a message that there is something wrong with who they are or how they are. So, how can we communicate to our gifted children that their response is intense and that we care about them? What can we say to them rather than stop being so overly sensitive?
A third message that we have chosen to share today that many of our gifted students hear way too often is, where did you get that from? That is a time for you to think about many gifted students struggle with metacognition, which means thinking about how they think. Many of them will say, I just know, and they're not sure how they got to that point. So instead of saying, where did you get that from? Expand their thinking and help them with their metacognition. You could say, that's a fascinating response. Tell me more. Or you could say, how did you make that connection? Allowing your gifted child to think about their answer will help expand their thinking and help you better get to know the way they process information in their gifted brain. We would love to hear from you. If you have a message that probably should be reframed that you have heard being said to your gifted child, we would love for you to share it and we could address it together. It could be something they've heard from their peers, from school, from relatives. What are some things that you have heard that just sometimes make you want to cringe as a parent because you know how that is taking an emotional toll on your child?
So we're going to look at some ways and give you in which you can support your gifted child. And we're going to look at how you can support them in understanding how their brain processes information. And then we're also going to look at supporting them in how they process their emotions. So on this first piece, we're looking at how they process information. And there's two key things that we have seen happen with students over and over again in the classroom. And while this is where we see it in the classroom, we've also seen it with our children as parents, and I'm sure that you see it at home. And so the more you can help your child understand their thought patterns and how to apply them and when to apply them, you can really help them be more successful in the classroom and in their future endeavors, and also help them understand their thinking processes. So the first thing we want to start with is knowing that the gifted brain makes broad connections. So, the brain has many different wires that are connected to one another. And with the gifted brain, there's even more, many, many more than the typical brain. And so therefore, when they're learning something new, they're making broader connections to things that most people don't make those connections to. And sometimes that can be an advantage for them. That's wonderful. That's where our inventors come up with new ideas, and they can revolutionize the world because of this ability to make broad connections. And yet sometimes it gets in their way. And one example that I remember is working with a fifth grader who was doing a short response for a reading passage. And the passage was on ancient forms of communication. And it was asking about how ancient people communicated. And right in the passage, it said they wrote in hieroglyphics on cave walls. And the student gave this response that was something about they used mud and water and sticks and flower petals and spread them on the walls to communicate. And when I was reading this response, I knew that this was very uncommon and it was wrong. So my first inclination was to give 0 out of 5 points. But then I thought, wait a minute, this is a good student and there has to be some reason why they wrote this response. So I called the student up and I said, hey, can you tell me more about this answer? And his response was, well, it says right in the passage that they used hieroglyphics to communicate, but this question is worth 5 points and it must require a more sophisticated answer than just saying that. So I thought, how did they create the ink to create the hieroglyphics? And I know that they could create that by using a combination of mud, water, sticks, and flower petals. So that's why I gave that as my answer. So I just chuckled a little to myself and I explained to him that sometimes the easy answer is the best answer. Just because the question was worth 5 points didn't make the easy answer an invalid answer. So as parents, we really want to help our children understand that sometimes just go with the easy answer. And yet, we also want to really give them opportunities to continue to make those broad connections and to encourage that activity and for them to see the value in that. So, how can we do that? We can do that by giving them time to work on passion projects, write stories, engage in creative activities and creative solving, and really immerse themselves in the areas that they are interested in exploring, and just talk to them about it, ask them about it, ask them to make those connections, and really help them see how valuable it is to continue to make those connections. And yet, sometimes give the easy answer. Another um, challenge that we frequently see gifted individuals experience in the classroom is that they can justify more than one correct answer, and therefore they can't pick any answer at all. I was giving a challenge to a first grader just not that long ago at all, and it was a riddle, and I said, "What twinkles in the sky can only be seen at night and is shiny?" And she looked at me, she goes, I really want to say stars, but the sun is a star and I see the sun during the day, so it can't be the answer. And I was so impressed that she recognized that the star is a sun. I'm sorry, that the star is a sun, that the sun is a star. But I had to let her know, you know what? Actually, the answer is star. You just thought about it even more deeply than most people do. So when you know that there's an obvious answer, even if there's a little piece of it that doesn't make sense, go with it. Pick the most obvious answer. But at the same time, to really help them explore their thinking and honor the way their brain works, give them opportunities to really think about their own thinking, to understand their thinking patterns and strategies so that they can become even stronger in those areas and know that we value them for those characteristics of theirs. So, how else do we support our gifted children? Now we're looking at emotional support. How do we develop strategies for them to work through those emotional intensities that we talked about earlier? As parents, we have the tendency to want to protect our children from negative experiences or negative emotions. That's just part of being a parent. We so want to protect them from these things. And as a result, we might focus on making it better or taking our child of having the experience they are having by saying, it's okay, it's not that bad. And while our intention for doing this is good, the impact that it can have on our child is to make them feel wrong about the natural experience that they are having. And in turn, they might develop habits of keeping their emotions from us, feeling that there is something wrong with them as they are, developing anxiety and other negative experiences that are even worse than the emotion that they're having in the moment. So rather than going down this path, we want to support them in processing their emotions, not turning them off or pretending they don't exist, but to actually support them in releasing them. So the first way in which we do that is in which we just allow them to express their emotion without them being good or bad. They just are. And any emotional experience only lasts for 30 to 60 seconds. So allow your child to experience it. Ask them what it feels like. Allow them to breathe through it. And then have them practice mindfulness, focusing on the present moment, not focusing on things that happened in the past that they wish that they did differently, or worrying about things that are coming in the future. Really practicing being in the moment and being aware of what is here right now. Also, giving them opportunities to make a positive impact on things that matter most to them empowers them and gives them authentic experiences that promote positive emotions, that really help them feel that they are contributing in a way that matters, that they are making a difference, that they have value. And this is incredibly powerful to our gifted students because they care so much about things like social justice. And also, a simple rule: avoid exposure to things like mainstream media, news, and social media stories that can be really overwhelming for them. So these are some highlights on ways in which we can help our students process their emotions rather than feel wrong for having them.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out of your Saturday to listen and learn more about your gifted children.